Good morning. With the help of Hashem, we are learning Yerushalmi Trumais. Peri Gimel Halacha Beis. We're learning today Daf Koyach Daf Chav Ches. We left off on Daf Chav Zayin Amud Beis. We'll begin again from 3 lines from the bottom of the Amud with the Gemara, and let's quickly review the case of Halacha Beis, the case of the Mishnah. The Mishnah is speaking about two shutvim, two partners, Reuven and Shimon. Let's use always the example just to simplify the numbers, and they grew 50 saw of grain, from which one saw has to be removed because midinei derabanan, the average person gives 2%. 2% from 50 is 1. So they're going to give 1 saw. Reuven gave the whole saw. And then Shimon, not knowing what Reuven did, also separated an entire saw. So we had Rabbi Akiva, Chachamim, and Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Akiva says, one more word of introduction. Even though we learned in the beginning of the chapter that one person, one of the 5 people that cannot designate Truma, and even post facto ain't Truma san Truma, from the 5 is Misha Toidem al She'enoi Shaloi, or Es She'enoi Shaloi. I cannot designate Truma from your produce for you. I cannot do that. However, Shlichus, which means if you appoint me to be your agent, to do it on your behalf, that certainly will allow me to do it for you. And let's go, we're learning Yerushalmi, as we spoke out a few daf ago, even if there isn't an explicit shlichus, let's use the words that the achronim use. There is gilui das, that there is consent. If there is consent, even though I wasn't appointed, that also is enough for me to be able to separate truma for you from your product. So the question by partners is, do we presume that one consented to the other? Rabbi Akiva Chachamim are simple, even though we're going to have to work out a few more details today in the Gemara. Rabbi Akiva says we do not presume that Shimon consented to Reuven's separation. We do not presume that Reuven consented to Shimon's separation. Each one's separation was only valid for their half, which would mean, like we said, that from the saw that Reuven separated, half of it is Truma, half of it is not. From the other saw that Shimon separated, half of it of Truma, half of it is not. And the details that we worked out, even though there'll be new details that we'll have today in the Gemara, is that now, let's go with Rabbi Akiva, you have one saw that's a bona fide meduma mixture of chulin, not chulin, but chulin from Truma, mesukin from Tevel from Truma, versus Truma, you have them mixed together. All of it can only be eaten by a kohen. You don't know what half is what half. No one knows. It was never known. So only a kohen can eat it. The kohen is not going to be gifted the whole saw from Reuven and the whole saw of Shimon. No. He's going to pay for half. He's going to pay the May Truma Bezoil. He'll pay a discounted price for the other half. And then we added another detail, which we're gonna get more into today with more nuance regarding, hold on, it's not that can the kohen just go eat it? Well, the half of Truma doesn't have to be Mesukan anymore, even though Truma was separated before Ma'aser Rishon, before Ma'aser Sheni, doesn't matter. Truma, as is completely rectified for the consumption of the kohen. Tevel that had Truma removed from it is Mesukan from Truma, but you still have to remove Ma'aseres. The half that the kohen received, he doesn't know which half is the half, but half, right, Aviv, you're with me, the half that is not Truma has to have Ma'aser removed from it. Then we spoke another detail yesterday. You can't even remove Ma'aser from it. Ma'aser from it would mean 10% of the half. Can't do that, because if you'll take it from it, maybe what you're taking is Truma. Truma is pattered from having Ma'aseres removed from it. And you cannot be toidem from Ptur ala chiyuv. So there has to be other produce that the kohen owns that is Mesuken from Truma. It has to be on the same level, but not yet Mesuken from Ma'aseres. And from that, remove for this. Okay. The Chachamim hold, again, simple, that the presumption is each partner is content with the other separation, which makes sense. We're speaking about 2 observant Jews. They know that their partners, they grew 50. They both know they're not taking home 50. One of the 50 is going to the kohen. They know that. So what Reuven did is to the benefit of Shimon. Shimon is not losing anything. B'chlal, you can also argue that. We spoke that yesterday. Why can I not be toidim for you? I'm doing you a favor. You anyways have to be toidim. There we can say we're not partners. And when I'm taking it, it's no longer yours. It's the kohen's. Also, maybe you want to have the mitzvah of doing it. So we say that we don't presume consent. But since they are partners, they are partners. Partners do things for the other. Adarabah, sometimes partners get upset when the other partner doesn't do what they think he should have done. So by a partnership, there's more logic to presume consent, gilui das. You don't need shlichus, you have gilui das. We're going to get to Rabbi Yossi in a moment. What the Gemara is going to do today is, first of all, we opened up with a question. We're going to reread the question. Both, I understand the Pnei Moshe's pshat and the Marav Fulda's pshat. The Gemara is going to just clarify or limit the scenario where we have the machlokes between Rabbi Akiva and the Chachamim. And the Gemara is going to show that the whole speech that I just gave right now with the half, and then the other half, and then with the Maisres, we're missing one piece. We'll get there, and there's one Gavaldik. Actually, we're going to speak about a quarter today. Because what we have is we have Tusa. Everything that I said now is correct for 3 halves. There's going to be one final half of a saw. We'll see whose. That'll be an interesting question on it. And the way we will learn Pshat in the Gemara, the question will go unanswered, even though the Rambam paskins like one side, as we'll see. I can't get ahead of myself because that's a big bulk of today's daf. After the clarification fully of what Rabbi Akiva holds, then we're going to move on to Rabbi Yossi. What we will ultimately see, B'negeya Rabbi Yossi, that it's not clear, the Gemara is not clear, whether Rabbi Yossi is a third opinion, or whether Rabbi Yossi is clarifying Shitas Chachamim. And let me explain to you what I mean by that. What did Rabbi Yossi say? I can tell you the words of Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Yossi says that Im Taram Harishain Kishiur, if Reuven separated it, the correct amount, whatever that specific correct amount is, then it sounds like Rabbi Yossi is saying, like the Chachamim, then his separation is fully Truma, and Shimon's separation is nothing. It was not needed. Doesn't change anything. Goes back into the pile. If the first separation was not Kishiur, then, again, the words of Rabbi Yossi are the words of Rabbi Akiva. Then we say that the Reuven, he didn't do it Kishir, he was only able to do for his half. Back at Rabbi Akiva. Again, we're going to see whether Rabbi Yossi is a third Shita. That all depends on what the meaning of the word Kishir is, or whether he is only clarifying Shitas Chachamim. The Rambam paskins that Rabbi Yossi clarifies Shitas Chachamim, again, as we'll see when we learn the daf today. From this topic, we will also see that the din of Min HaMukav, that Truma has to be separated. We learned so many dafim about Min HaMukav, and it could be it's even a Doiraisa. It's only a din of Lechatchila. We'll see from our sugya that if B'di'evid you did not separate something Min HaMukav, the separation is valid. We will also see that even though when I separate Truma, there has to be intent, right? I have a pile, I'm separating a part for the rest. We will see that there's something called halachic intent. We'll see what that means. That even though I did not have conscious intent, halachically I did have intent, which is amazing. And the final topic of today, I hope we squeeze it all in. The Mishnah spoke at the end regarding what were to happen if the Mishaleach was mevatel the shlichus. And the point the Mishnah was making is that, of course, the Mishaleach can nullify the shlichus, but it's only mikanu lahaba. It's not lemafreya. So if the Mishaleach decided to be mevatel the shlichus, right, of the person separating truma for his behalf, after he already did it, even though you can be mevatel shlichus, it's too late because it doesn't go back retroactive. Now, I want you to know that being mevatel shlichus is a sugya that we have in many places in Shas, as we'll see. We're going to go back to a very important machlekes Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish, whether asi dibur umevatel dibur, or whether loy asa dibur umevatel dibur. Only Maisa can be mevatel dibur, which means, Aviv, that you can appoint a shliach b'dibur. That's clear. Amazing. You don't even need a kinyan. You can appoint someone to be your proxy. There are certain things that halachically are established with only words. However, once they are established, it's so strong, it's a halacha, that some opine that to undo it, only an action can undo it. No longer can words undo it. And the problem we will have in our Gemara is, according to, I think it's Reish Lakish who holds that lo yasa dibur umevatel dibur, exactly what would be the case of the Mishnah? How was he mevatel the shlichus? Which is a general question. I know in Kedushin, the whole story was that a woman sent a shlich like Kabbalah, and then she was mevatel the shlichus. Right, the Shlakish holds that loy also dibur mevatel dibur, but there she can do a ma'isa. We're not getting into Kedushin. We'll see over here how this will have to be clarified how this applies in our sukkah. L'chaim, this is gavaldik. So Chaved Daf Chav Zayin Amud Beis. The Gemara is asking, where do Rabbi Akiva and the Chachamim argue, man, nan, kaimin? What are we talking about? What's the case? Let me go with the Pnei Moshe, because I want to learn the Pnei Moshe. I didn't read it fully. Mamchin, according to Pnei Moshe, means if they are partners that are very particular one with the other. Partners that are particular one with the other, listen to the words of the Pnei Moshe. Let's say me and you. If I'm a finicky person, and maybe that's not the right word, if I'm a very rigid person, when you do it right, I'm happy. But if you do it wrong, I won't be happy. So he says like this, that if the partners are very medagdik with each other, what Reuven did is correct. Why? Because Reuven took off one saw. One saw has to be removed. What Shimon did is not correct. Since Reuven removed, Reuven will never be content with what Shimon did. That's the pshat. Ibe mamchen, if they are very nervous one with the other, they're very exacting one with the other. Exacting doesn't mean that everything my partner does will be bad. It means that if he makes a mistake, I'll be very upset with him. Then Rabbi Akiva should be moidem to the Chachamim that the truma of the Rishon should be fully truma, and the truma sheni should not be truma. Shimon should consent to Reuven. Reuven took off truma. It was tevel. Tevel has to be truma. And once you do that, what, you think they're happy that two saw is going to go to a kohen? According to Rabbi Akiva, the partners lose. Even though the kohen only gets as a gift one saw, but he ends up with two saw, and he paid a discounted price. They won't be maskim to that. And if they're not mamchin, if they're partners that they fargin, they tolerate one the other, then the Rabbanan should be moide to the Chachamim that, listen, everyone showed that they wanted to do it. Okay, so it came out that instead of walking home with 49 saw at the end, after Truma, they're only walking home with 48. If they're not so meticulous, they'll be okay with it. That's the Pnei Moshe. The Marafulda learns, mamchin means if they are experts, pashat experts, if they are mumchim, meaning you have to know what you're doing. If they both of them know the dinim of Truma, by the way, expertise would mean over here, they know the din of 2%. If they both are mumchen, then why would Rabbi Akiva say that we don't presume Shimon was happy with what Reuven did? Why not? You know, when partners feel, when two partners, right? If I know that you know what you're doing in a certain area, we're partners. I rely on you. Then Truma of the Rishon should be fully Truma, and Truma Sheni should not be Truma. And if we're not experts, why would the Chachamim hold that there's a presumption that Shimon would be so consenting to what Reuven did? Why would he consent? That's two. I mean, no, inside, same thing. So where exactly are they arguing? Asks the Gemara, answers the Gemara. Daf Chav Ches, Daf Koyach. Classic answer. Ki nan kaimen. In the Bavli, how does it go? Aviv hacha b'mayaskinon. Just get used to the different wording. It's Aramaic. It's different. It's a different dialect of Aramaic. There's the Aramaic of the West. There's Aramaic of the East. Bottom line, it was different. Ki nan kaimen bistam. You have a stam. Stam means they're not very exacting one from the other, nor are they so easygoing one with the other. Or they're not the greatest experts, and they're not the greatest amaratzim. They're like us. We know, epis, we know. Half a haircut. So, Rabbi Akiva oimer, that stam ein mamchin. Rabbanan omrim stam ein mamchin. The Gemara is making a point with this. The Gemara is trying to point out that Rabbi Akiva's rule is not hard and fast. That's the way I understand. In other words, when we're having a machlokes, whether there's a presumption of a partner that he consented or not, the Gemara wants to tell you, don't read the Mishnah and say, this is what it says, that's how it is. It's not true. If we happen to know that partner and we know that this is not a consenting type of person, even the Chachamim Amoide, he didn't consent. That's what the Gemara is saying. Or the opposite. If we know this person, we know them. Not we know them, they know them. Not they know them the way they delude themselves. When you look at yourself, you don't see yourself properly. It's known. Observe it. An outsider, they know these two partners. Maybe it sounds to them that they're always arguing. I know them. They always give in. They always moichel. In other words, it's not a hard and fast rule, but there is that gray area in where it's ambiguous. That's I just need coffee, guys. The kid said, "Let's go weiter." Now let's work out another detail. Guys, Rabbi Mendel made the correction. Not the Gabbai, not even Dan Ram. It's amazing. Okay, now.
By the way, Rabbi.
Yes.
He says here, Bistam, that it's unknown, meaning I don't know if you're proficient or not, or you don't know about me. So therefore, is that reliable or not? It's not. I mean, even if I'm good, but if you don't know that I'm good, so then
how can it be?
How can I?
Don't know?
How can I be your shliach?
Okay.
We're business partners. I don't know how observant my friend is.
Very good. I just broadened it a bit more. I think it's very limiting to touch it that way. I think it's more that I would argue that all of us today, all of us over here, that we're not amaratzim, but we know how little we know. So let's go. Are you a mumcha? Are you a mumcha in something? No. You're knowledgeable. You know the topic. That's the way I see it. These experts. If you have an expert in Trumas U'Maisros, that L'Kula Alma, the other partner would consent. If you have an Ama'aretz Midayraisa, he knows nothing. Okay, that we are. But I'm saying for people that for me, Stam would be a good way of thinking it. People that learn a lot of Gemara, but they're not masters in halacha. That would be Bistam. In other words, Stam would be a Rosh Yeshiva, not a Rav, not to insult the Rosh Yeshivas. He understands the bones, the Yisoid, but the application of it, he's not the expert. Okay, now listen to the challenge over here. Aviv, you have to hold up. It's easy, but it's not easy. I mean, you have to concentrate. We're going to take what happened at the end is, right, there's two saws separated from Reuven and from Shimon. And we're talking about Rabbi Akiva now. So we said, okay, one, we don't presume consent. Therefore, Reuven has no right to separate for Shimon's half. Let's begin to work out the details, and we'll get stuck somewhere. And we'll on 1/4 of the two saw, there are 4 halves. Not every half of saw I'm calling a quarter. On one of the halves of the saw, the Gemara will have a shayla. Let's read it. According to the sheet of Rabbi Akiva, saw shal rishain. I'm calling Reuven the rishain. Chetzia truma. Right, half of it is truma. Because he did not have the right to separate for Shimon, but half he owns. And v'chetzia, like we said, tevel tevula lakoil. This statement is not the way we said it in the Mishnah, and it won't even be the maskan of the Gemara. What we're saying over here is, let me ask you a question, Aviv. Just think about it. I'm Reuven and you're Shimon, okay? I separated the half. Let's go with step number 1 is, you did not consent. You did not consent. So half is truma. What is the other half? Tevel. Completely tevel. Then you, Shimon, separated another saw. So we're saying that Shimon's second saw, half of it is truma. Truma for what? Answer the question. The half that Shimon separated is truma for his half. Where was Shimon's half? 99% of it was in the pile. But there's a little bit of the chelik of Shimon that was in the saw that Reuven separated. Reuven separated from, there's a pile of 50. Reuven takes away a saw. We're saying that he had no right to do it for the half that Shimon owns. Okay, so only half is Truma. The other half is Tevel. Why? Because it's not his. Who does that half belong to really? Before Shimon does that, it belongs to Shimon. You're good? You're with me? Shimon goes ahead and he goes to the pile now of 49. He doesn't know that there's 49. He doesn't know who Reuven took. He thought there's 50. What does he do? Takes away one. What does Rabbi Akiva say? Oh, the one that he separated, first of all, half was already trumad. Half for his is effective. Okay, so the half of Shimon is affected. What was it misaking? The half that belonged to Shimon. Where was Shimon's half? Shimon's half was not in the same place. Most of it was in the pile. Half of the pile was Shimon's. But really, when Reuven separated one saw, half of that saw that was designated as Truma, they used to have Kalim, it had a tuff on it, and then Truma. It was in the Truma area that really belonged to Shimon. Shimon did not know that that half was there. Didn't know that. When Shimon separated, what did he have in mind? He's separating his saw for the big pile. So the Gemara is beginning with the premise that there is a huge difference between Reuven's saw and Shimon's saw, which is Reuven's saw, half of it is Truma, and the half of it remains completely Tevel even after Shimon separates his half. Even after Shimon separates, when Shimon separates his saw, so in the pile, is everything okay? From Truma, yes. Everything now is Mesukin from Truma, but everything needs to have Maisres removed from it. Okay? We also spoke out yesterday, and we repeated it today. The Kohen who's going to get the two saw, what did we say he needs to do? We said, well, for half, he gets to eat. But half from both saw, for one entire saw, he has to resolve the Maiser Rishon. The Gemara is saying, no, more. The half that Shimon separated, the saw that Shimon separated, half of it is going to be Truma, half of it is going to be Mesukin from Truma. Why is that? Why is half from Shimon's going to be Mesukin from Truma? Because the entire saw of Shimon was in the pile when Reuven removed his saw. So when he removed the saw, his half of his saw was Mesakin, half of the pile. When Shimon removed Shimon's saw, what's really happening is that half has to be Mesukined, but what's really happening is that not only does half of the pile have to be Mesukined from Truma, even half of Reuven's saw has to be Mesukined from Truma. Because when Reuven separated one saw, half was not his to separate. Shimon didn't know that. Oh, both. Aviv, you got this? Nachamal, it's okay. I'm Reuven, you're Shimon. I separate a saw. I have no right to separate for Shimon. So what's the status of my saw? Half Truma, half what? Tevel from what? Tevel, complete Tevel. Tevel means you don't even have Truma. It's not even fixed from Truma. But now comes Shimon and Shimon separates another one. When Shimon separates his one, we're saying that half of what Shimon did is ineffective. It was already Mesukin. But Shimon, at least, is separating for his half. But Shimon's half was not in the same place. Shimon's half was 99% in the big pile. The half of Reuven's separation also really belongs to Shimon. Shimon didn't know that. So when Shimon separated a whole saw, and Rabbi Akiva says, well, the whole saw was extra. Half of what you took off is being mesaken, the remaining from Tevel, from Truma. Okay, that only fixed the pile from Tevel, from Truma. But the half that the Kohen is going to get, half of Reuven's, is completely Tevel. In contrast to Shimon's separation. See, when Shimon separated from the 49, one, he didn't know that there's 40. He thought there's 50, separated one. Half of that was already fixed. Half of that was already fixed by Reuven for the Reuven's half. All that needs to be fixed is the other half. In the one that he took, half of that one which was in the pile before is already Mesukin from Truma. So from Shimon's, whole saw, that the kohen gets half for free, vadai. The other half only has to be rectified from maasros, vadai. The half that he's paying cheap price for doesn't have to be fixed from truma. It was mesukin from truma. But from the saw that he gets from Reuven, half is for free. The other half that he has to rectify, not only does he have to rectify it from maasros, that's what the Gemara is beginning with, perhaps that half even has to be rectified for truma. Because how was that mesukin from truma? When Shimon made a separation, Shimon did not know what Reuven did. All that Shimon thought was that he's taking off from the pile, which he thought was 50. He's taking off one saw for all of the pile. But he didn't have in mind to separate for the other half of Reuven's saw that's already in another place. It's an akeli for truma. Let's read it inside. That's the Havamina. V'chetzia, the second half of Reuven, Rabbi Akiva, is not only tevel from maasros. That's the meaning of tevel, tvula lakoil. It's legamri tevel because Shimon's later separation, lechuura, was not for it at all. He didn't know, first of all, there's minamukav, it wasn't together. And even though minamukav was only a din of lachatchila, he had no intent to separate. He didn't even know what Reuven did. Didn't know it's there. However, in contrast, Saw Shalsheni, when Shimon separates his saw, what really happened is that what Shimon took off, half of it is already mesukin by Reuven. Only half of what Shimon took off is for Shimon's half. Okay, the other half is already mesukin from Truma. It doesn't have maasros removed yet. The half of Chulin. V'chetzia tevel tevula only lemaasros. So Reuven's and Shimon's are not the same. You take the two saw, you divide them into halves, into quarters. You have 4 quarters. 3 of them, so I guess 2 of them, the kohen can eat without doing anything because it's truma, whichever they are. He gets to eat half of what he gets. But from the other saw, that should be divided in half. From Reuven's half, the kohen has to resolve truma and maaser. From Shimon's second half, the kohen only has to resolve maasros. I can hear you, Akir. Yeah, it's good. It's gewaldig. I love it. It worked. We have to work it out. And the Gemara says that maybe, yeah, maybe not. The way the Mara Fulda reads it, it's a very hard reading. There's no need. There was no need to make the statement regarding the second half of Shimon, Pshita, that the second half of Shimon, the one that's not Truma, is for sure Mesukan LeTruma. Why? For sure, because before Shimon came, everything was in the pile. When Reuven took his saw, Reuven thought he's doing a favor to everyone. He thought he's taking. The halacha says, Reuven, you had no right, you had no gilui das from Shimon, so what you did is only half effective. But at least for that half, it was fully effective. When Shimon takes off one saw, half of it is already mesukin from truma. The other half becomes truma. So how we explained the second half of Shimon's saw is vadai. There's no need for that. The chiddush of the statement, which is debatable, is mao shetifter chatzi shashol rishon. Do we indeed say what we just said before, that when the kohen receives the saw from Reuven, does he have to be mesaken half of it, not only for maasros, but even for truma? In other words, the Gemara is challenging, maybe not. Maybe, what's the other side of this, Aviv? That even though Shimon did not know that Reuven made a separation of a saw, since Shimon intended to be mesaken everything, it even worked for the half that wasn't there at the time. Even though he didn't know that it was not there. In other words, maybe we should say that both Reuven's and Shimon's are mamish the same. So the Gemara says, Daf Chav Chesamid Beis, that we will resolve this inquiry, this doubt. Agadata is just a halachic story. Nashmina min hadar.
Rabbi.
Yes.
Is it about the second partner's intention, or is it the actual legal viability of being able to separate truma for something that's not physically
both. Very
in
good.
this pile.
Mamish, both. Let's read it. You'll see. Both. And this story is Gavaldik because it's a different case. It's a simpler case, but it's the same neshama. That what Aristoin, the second time we had him, Aristoin brought Peter. He brought it in a sack. This is something that can really happen. You have a sack of fruits, and the Shayir Goisako. What happened was, think about it. You have this dirty sack from the market. You come into your house, everything is tevel. Not everyone removes the truma from the sack because it's whatever. What you did was you have in your house a pretty bowl, as an example. So you pour the sack into the bowl, and then you go and you begin to do all the separations. Unbeknownst to you, when you poured from the sack into your bowl in the house, a couple of potatoes stayed in the sack. You didn't know that. It's very similar. In other words, you're the owner. You own everything. But you don't know that there's something in the sack. You thought you got it in the bowl. And you're doing the first step. You're going to do all the steps. The first step is truma. After you remove truma, you chop. 1 second. There's still a couple of loose tomatoes over there in the bag. Was your separation effective for that which was in the bag? Danny, exactly. There are two issues. Number one is it's not min hamukav. Are you even able to? Number two, even if b'diavad you are able to, you did not have that in mind. So what happened was vitaram, and he went and he asked the shaila. The shaila came in front of Rabbi Yosi, the Amoira. Asi uvda kumi Rabbi Yosi v'amar chazaka al hakoil taram, which means number one, min hamukav is only a din of lechatchila, not b'diavad. Number two, even though, of course, truma needs intention. That means if I have a bag of tevel and I absent-mindedly just roll off on the side, I have to have kavana. And more, nevertheless, the kavana is really to be mesaken my tevel. The fact that I was not fully knowledgeable of the mitzias, which is that not only is there tevel in the bowl, but there's also a couple of pieces of vegetable in the sack, which means that I did not intend for the sack, it doesn't matter. Because there is an underlying kavana, which is, I want to be mesaken my produce. So halachically, we say that intention is extended even to that I was unaware of. And therefore, coming back over here, the way we learned the Mishnah yesterday was accurate. We don't differentiate between any of these four halves. We don't. What we say is when the kohen gets two, he pays for one cheap and he gets the other one for free. Half of it is his to eat, and he has to be mesaken the other half, both the half of Reuven and the half of Shimon equally, which is he only has to resolve the maisres, and both of them are mesuken from truma. Because when Shimon took off his one saw, he had a mind to be mesaken Shimon had a mind to be mesaken everything. We're just saying it's not effective. It's only effective for what he owns. But for all of what he owns, which is also the half inside Reuven saw, belongs to Shimon, that becomes misukin from Truma. Gewaldig.
Wait, so in this case, are we saying did he not separate enough Truma that he didn't know that he had more fruits?
So there's another unspoken topic, very good, Aviv, which is...
It doesn't have to be exact.
It doesn't have to be exact, because if it would have to be exact, the whole thing is inexact. In other words, he wanted to separate 1 of 50 before that other half. What happened was there's a pile of 49. He thought there's 50. Based on his presumption, he separated one saw. Why don't we say the whole thing is betos? We don't say that. That's something that's unspoken here. But you see it from our Mishnah that, and it's all, if you would have to give exact, then you would argue you didn't give exact. Since it's only by approximation, the approximation is here. The approximation is helpful. And I'm sure that some other area we should remember where Daf Chav Ches, we're going to have a stira to this. If I remember, we already learned something that implied otherwise. But that's a very good observation. Here you clearly see that is not an issue here in the Mishnah. Even though there was a erroneous premise.
Same thing for the story of Aristotle?
Same thing with Aristotle is not so problematic. I'll tell you why. Because by Aristotle, he knew he bought 50 pounds. Based on that, he gave 1 pound. it actually turned out that the 2% is accurate because it included the remnant in the sack. In Aristoin's story, it makes it more accurate. The story of the Mishnah, the whole thing of the whole Shimon's is inaccurate. Even though at the end of the story, according to Rabbi Akiva, at the end of the story, everything turns out accurate. Because what's the end of the story? One saw's truma. L'chachamim, even according to Rabbi Akiva, one saw at the end, exactly 2% was given. It's another solution here. Okay. Or Adarabba, if based on the Havamina, that if Shimon's separation would not be effective for the half of Reuven's, then it would be inaccurate. Now it turns out to be exactly 2%. Okay, now we're going to go to Rabbi Yossi.
I'm just wondering what happens if some of the Kohen's pile gets tummy, and then
yeah.
What do?
We have to know all of the dinim. Yeah, I mean, I can tell you right now, you can't eat any of it because you have a suffix truma tameya. Toilin. Everything will have to be toilin. It's a 50-50 doubt. Okay. Huh? Toilin means is that truma has kedusha, so you're not allowed to waste truma. You have an obligation to consume it properly. If it's tamei, then you burn it. Midrabanan, you have to burn it. If there's a doubt if it's tamei, then you're trapped. You can't burn it because maybe it's edible. Can't eat it, maybe it's tamei. So you have to put it in a place. You have to wait for it to become tamei by itself. And once it becomes tamei, then you go ahead and you burn it. Toilet means you leave it hanging. Now, the words of Rabbi Yossi is Rabbi Yossi oimer im taram harishan kishir. We don't know what the shir means. Then he says the words of the Chachamim. You can look at the Mishnah. Ein truma sasheni truma. But if loy taram harishan kishir, then he says the words of Rabbi Akiva. So let's first the Gemara is going to show you that the word kishir can mean this, can mean that, from one extreme to the other. And this is mamish exciting. Rabbi Yossi oimer fragt Gemara, what does he mean? What are the two options? I'll tell you. Midoy Raisaviv, you don't have a minimum amount of truma needed to be given. Midoy Raisa, even if you take off one little kernel from a pile that's a ton, everything is rectified from truma. You get away with giving very little. Midrabanan, they made a 3-tier system. The average, the Beininus, which is 1 from 50 or 2%. Someone who's generous, who wants to give more to the coin, will give 1 from 40. I don't know what that percent is. Where's Vlad? He'll tell you the exact percent. And a person who's stingy will give 1 from 60. Now, either kishir means kishir Torah, or kishir means 1 from 50. And accordingly, as I'll explain, either Rabbi Yossi is a third opinion, or Rabbi Yossi is arguing with the Chachamim. Now let me go back to the Chachamim. The presumption of our Gemara is that when the Chachamim said that we say Shimon consents with what Reuven did, what did Reuven do? When the Mishnah never speaks out, we're speaking about what someone did. This is a case that could happen. We keep rabbinic law. Reuven separated 1 from 50. That's in other words, without the Mishnah specifying that he gave it Kebeininis, it's self-understood whenever we speak about someone being Toidem, he gave 1 of 50. If Rabbi Yossi means Kishir Torah, then Rabbi Yossi is arguing with the Chachamim. And let me tell you what he's saying. The Chachamim say, if Reuven gives 1 from 50, Shimon consents. Says Rabbi Yossi, no. Shimon never asked Reuven to do it. Shimon can argue, if I would do it, you know what I would do? I would give 1 little crumb to the kohen. Like, why are we presuming Shimon consents to Reuven when Reuven did it properly? And Shimon knows that I could have gotten away by giving a lot less. And by the way, you see from our Gemara that in many rabbinic law, once the Chachamim say it has to be done in a certain way, even post facto, it has to be done that way. What we're clearly seeing is that even though the Chachamim said that you should give the average of 1 of 50 to the kohen, if you only went back Kishir Torah and you gave 1 little kernel for the whole kri, Even midrabanan, the kri is no longer tevel from truma. You resolve the truma. So is it kishir truma? Oi, he means kishir chaveden, like the shir of the chachamim, which would mean 1 from 50. And the Gemara explains, I ta'abdine kishir toira, if you will interpret that the words of Rabbi Yossi, who says, im tarem harishan kishir, means that if Reuven gave that one little crumb, then we say Shimon consented. Clearly, Rabbi Yossi is a new opinion. There's Rabbi Akiva, there's the Chachamim. Again, the Chachamim is speaking about a case, the normal case, where Reuven separated, like we said, one saw. To which Rabbi Yossi says, no, why are you presuming consent from Shimon to Reuven? It makes sense. When Shimon knows that if he wanted to cut corners, he could have cut a corner. How do you know he doesn't want to cut a corner? He could have gotten away. Now, if Reuven gave one little drop, Shimon consented.
The other way, what if Shimon wanted to abide by the rabbinic law? Then one little kernel wouldn't be enough for it. It would still technically be enough, but Shimon wants to do the mitzvah the best way.
I like your question. I have a bigger question. Why don't we say the case of the Mishnah is that Shimon did not know that Reuven did anything? So Shimon, what did Shimon do? He separated a saw, 1 of 50. Why don't we say that from what Shimon did is a raya? And the answer must be is that it's about partnerships. It's going back to the psychology of partners. Did I ask you to do this for me? I have the right to determine for me, I'm going to give it properly. You don't make that determination for me. I go to the market and I want to spend the extra $1 to buy the meat mahadrin, mina mahadrin. I can do that. But when you're using my money to buy meat, buy mahadrin. Why are you eating up my money because you're making me a mahadrin, mina mahadrin? That's the way I would see it. Because even though Shimon was megala das that he separated the saw, Rabbi Yossi is saying, I don't have the right as a partner. I don't have the right to do something that is, even though it's by the letter of the law, it's beyond the letter of the law. Because b'di'evet, even there's a shir Torah. Could have gotten away with less. But if we'll understand that the words kishir of Rabbi Yossi means that if Reuven separated exactly one saw, then he consented because he did it properly. If Reuven separated 1 of 60 or 1 of 40, that also makes sense. Then he'll hold like Rabbi Akiva. How does Reuven? Because the average, most people separated 2%. If that would be the pshat and Rabbi Yossi, then Rabbi Yossi is not even arguing with the Chachamim. If that's the pshat, then Rabbi Yossi is clarifying the Rabbanon. In other words, the Rabbanon are saying that what? That there's a presumption that Reuven and Shimon, they consent one to the other. Rabbi Yossi says, okay, I get it. When is there such a presumption? When each one behaved properly. And even in the properly, which is they followed rabbinic law, in the rabbinic law, each one gave 2%. Because most people gave 2%. The moment one partner gives either 1 of 40 or 1 of 60, even the Chachamim will hold. Without the expressed consent from your partner, we don't presume he consented. Not for you to be stingy for him, not for you to be generous for him. People want for you to do the right thing. In other words, according to the second understanding of Kishir, it's beautiful. Rabbi Yossi is not a third Shita. Now, our Gemara doesn't answer the question. Aber the Rambam paskins, really, like what did we learn yesterday? Rabbi Akiva v'chavei roi. Rabbi Akiva v'chavei rov, we paskin like the Chachamim. And nevertheless, the Rambam paskins like the Chachamim, but then he adds this understanding of Rabbi Yossi. Clearly, the Rambam who learned the Yerushalmi learned it in a way where he leaned on the second side, that there isn't a three-way machlokes. The Rambam certainly doesn't say kishir, like the Rambam doesn't paskin like Rabbi Yossi. He never allows for one person to separate one kernel. The Rambam says that if one partner designated for the other, if he took the beinanis, if he took 1 from 50, then we presume the partner agreed, gilui das, consent. If he didn't go he writes it clearly, if he did 1 of 60 or he did 1 of 40, then what he did is only effective for his half and not for the half of his chavon. Gewaldig. And now the final topic of today, and I'm happy we have 5 minutes because this is really geschmack. In many times in halacha, not just in our topic, of just a few words of introduction. I'll give you one example of tum and tara. When is something susceptible to becoming tamei? Only after it's a completed utensil. Prior to it being a completed utensil, it's not susceptible to becoming tamei. So we have a Mishnah that speaks about a piece of leather. As is, this thing of leather could be used as a mat. If that would be its designated purpose, then it's ready to be used, therefore susceptible to becoming tamei. Or if you're a shoemaker, a belt maker, then if you will decide to still make this into a pair of shoes, then it's an unfinished product. So what will determine that? The designation of the owner. That is done b'machshava. So what happens if he had a machshava to use it as a mat, and then he changes its designation? So there's a machlokes tanoim. In other words, even though machshava is enough to make something, to establish a halacha, once it's established, perhaps you need to have a maisa now to undo the machshava. Very similar over here. No one holds that to designate a shliach, you have to write a document. No one, it's amazing. The designation of a shliach is done orally. Dibur is enough. Question is, if you want to nullify shlichus, on one hand, you would say, Rabbi Yochanan says, asa dibur, umevatel dibur. Yeah, why not? If dibur is good enough to make it, hapesha asa, hapesha hit it. That Shlakish says no. That to create something is relatively easy. To undo it, you need a lot more koyach. The case of Reish Lakish was a punkt in the case of a woman who sent a shliach like Kabbalah to be mekabel kiddushin, and after the shliach went, the woman changed her mind by nullifying the shlichus. And Reish Lakish holds that the moment the shliach like Kabbalah got the kiddushin, she is engaged. Why? Because loy asa dibur u'mavatel dibur. The understanding of the Gemara in our Mishnah regarding shlichus by truma is that the only nullification was by the owner being megaladas that he doesn't want the shliach to do it on his behalf. Problem is, how will Reish Lakish understand our Mishnah? That's the Gemara's question. Bitel, if the owner was mevatel the appointment of the shlichus. So the word of the Mishnah was, it's not retroactive, it's only going forward. And therefore, if im actually taught him bitel, then truma is not truma. But if he was mevatel it after the truma was separated, too late. You nullified the shlichus, but it's only mikano lahaba. But how did the bichlal nullify it? And the presumption is he nullified the appointment aviv by saying, I don't want you to, I take away his power. I revoke, the Gabbai says, I revoke my appointment. So frek the Gemara v'leis hada pliga al de Reish Lakish, doesn't this somehow imply a question against Reish Lakish? Why? Because Reish Lakish is the one that says, Ein adam mivatel shlichus bedvarim, because since the appointment of shlichus is bedibur, loy asa dibur u'mavatel dibur. So the Gemara gives an answer that is really a problem that has to be further explained. But let's read the words of the answer. If to answer the Gemara, explain it. Keep going. Let me tell you what happened. When the Mishaleach, when the owner appointed the shlichus, he told him something specific. I want you to designate the truma that's in the northern end of the pile. They came along the shliach, and he deviated from that detail. V'halach v'kava b'daraim. Even in such a case, will Reish Lakish be moide that now asa dibur u'mavatel dibur? When you learn this, you should jump with a problem. What's the problem? Doesn't memanashach. If changing a detail in shlichus, as we learned the sugi and kedushin, right, daf nun tes, is going to completely nullify what you did, I don't need the mishaleach to go and be mevatel the shlichus. The whole topic was he only, go be makabel kedushin in this city, and they went to another city. What was the intent? Was it simplifying the life of the shliach, or was it being medayik? So, if this detail is essential, so the deviation of the detail is in itself the bittul of shlichus. We don't need for him to revoke it. If the detail was big deal, just a mashal, go to the tzaf, and he went to the Dunham. So then you're back to the kasha. The Shlakish holds, right? Doesn't fit. Lo yasadim avatel dibur. So here's the answer. We are going in the Yerushalmi that for me to separate truma for you, I don't only need shlichus. Shlichus is the top. But as we learned, we spoke out before, even without shlichus, if we know there is consent, there's gilui das, even without the appointment of shlichus, I can separate it for you. Now listen to these words. When I, the shliach, let's say you're the mishalech, I'm your shliach. When I went ahead and I deviated, listen, Aviv, you told me separate it in the north part of the keli and I took it from the south. My deviation broke the shlichus. My deviation broke the shlichus. But we still have a gilui das. No, we see that the owner wants for truma to be taken. We know that the owner is already, he's okay with him not doing it. He's not getting the mitzvah. I'm doing the mitzvah. I'm making the brach. He's okay with that. So even though the deviation was mevatel the shlichus, but there's still a gilui das. To nullify the gilui das, it's enough for the mishalech to say b'dibur, I don't want you to do it for me. Beautiful. No, when does Resh Lakish say that lo yasa dir mevatel dibur? When the dibur has to nullify the agency, the halacha of a shlichus. If the din shlichus was nullified because of the deviation that he told me b'tzaf and I went b'darim, so why does he have to say a peep? I'll tell you why. Because only the shlichus was nullified, but there's still consent. But now that he's saying I don't consent, even a shlikish is made to take away the gilui das, dibur is enough. Beautiful. To be continued. That was great. Where's Rabbi Brud?